Today we're going to be creating an events-based input manager using the new input system in Unity. So firstly, go ahead and install the new input system. And once you've installed the input system, we need to create a new scriptable object. So we create a new script and call this input manager. Once that's compiled, we'll open it up in Visual Studio. When it decides to wake up. Okay, so instead of mono behavior, we're going to inherit from scriptable object. And we need to have an asset menu. So let's create asset menu. We're going to call this input manager, and this is our menu name and path. We can do away with start and update, so we don't need those. But we will need some variables. So we'll start with the movement variables. And we can hide all these in the inspector. We don't need to see them. So we want a vector2 for our move vector and a vector2 for our look vector. Next we need our fire, look, etc. events. So we're going to have a public event, Unity action, jump event, and jump cancelled event, and then we're going to have a boolean for the jump action pressed, and I've added one for fire here, but you can do as many as you want. To get rid of that red arrow, we'd be using Unity events. Okay, so you can do jump action, fire action, sprint action, etc. I'll only do these two for this sample. Now we need some methods, so we need to do our look vector, our movement vector, and our two methods for these two events here. Okay, so the first one will be a public void input action, so we need to be using the input system. Input action callback context, and we just call that CTX, which seems to be the standard. And all we're going to do is set our move vector to read a vector2 value, and the same with our look vector. So if you want to code those out, again we need to do the same now for our two events, and this time we're actually going to fire some events out. So these will be our jump button and our fire button. So again we're going to use input action callbacks. First of all, we'll check if the callbacks are formed, then we're going to invoke the jump event, and we're going to set a bool jump action press to true, which is the bool we've got up here. And on the cancelled event, we're just going to call the cancel event and set the boolean to false. This is so we can muck about with timers and stuff for weapons or interactions, etc. And you might not want the event, you might just want to work on a bool. We can go ahead and save that, because that's literally all we need so far. So if we just go ahead and go back over it, we've got two vectors from movement and our looking. We've got our methods to read the vector2 in. Then we've got our events. This question mark is just basically a null check. So if the event's fired and nothing's listening, it won't cause any errors. Now you can fill as many of these in as you like. I'm only going to just do the two, but for your input manager you'll need lots more. So now if we jump back into Unity, let all that compile, we can now go to create scriptable objects, input assets, input manager, and that will create our scriptable object input manager. So if we now create an empty object, jump in and add a player input, Our actions, I've already set some actions up. We're going to be using Unity events. So if we now jump down here, we've got move, look, and jump. So we can drag the scriptable object into each of those. And we can do get movement vector, input manager, get look vector, and input manager, get jump button. Okay, now we'll call this one input manager so we know where we are. Now we need some samples, so let's create another empty game object and we'll drag my sample script onto it. And if we open that up in Visual Studio, we can now get rid of these. So we'll have a public input manager, and on enable we want to subscribe to the jump action event. On disable we want to desubscribe to the jump action event. In update, we first of all we'll just do the move vector. So if we save that, let that compile and have a look up here. When we press play, it might help if I actually assign the input manager. So let's hit play again. As you can see, it's saying move, and now we've got our movement vectors. So movement's looking fine. If we close that one off, we'll test our look. And we can do our jump as well. So if we just clear that, as we can see, we've got our look vector. That's working fine. And if we clear that, and if we press our jump button, you'll see jump going up and you'll see look moving. Let me just stop that. We'll just get rid of that for a second so you can just see the jump repeating itself. If I press play, press my jump button, it comes up 1 count, 2 counts, 3 counts, 4 counts, 5 counts. And if you just look at the sample, all we're doing is we set our jump action event to this method and we're just debugging. So that's how you can make a events-based scriptable object-powered input manager. We'll probably be using this in an FPS series. So I hope you found the video useful, and I will see you in the next one.